The defense has consistently failed to unpick this witness's testimony. Here's to any attempt you may make at unpicking the juror's decisions being equally successful. I don't believe it. After I've come so far. How is it all unraveling on me so fast? How very distressing. To be held in such low esteem. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Naruhodo? Officer? You've delivered the report now. That'll be all, thank you. It occurs to me with some regularity, Mr. Naruhodo, that scientific truths are determined not by science, but by none other than the human mind. I know that voice. Am I going mad? Ah! Oh, I was not expecting that, actually. Mr. Sholmes! What is the meaning of this? Order, order, order! What business do you have here, detective? The last I heard, you were recuperating in hospital. As well I would be, had I not been set up upon an errand. What errand? Hurley! It's really you! You're awake at last! Yes, good day, Iris. I appear to be rather late to rise. My apologies. Now, my lord, if you will humor me. In what manner, sir? I have something of great importance I wish to give to the young lawyer over there. I need no more than 5 minutes. Would you be so kind as to spare us the time? What say you to this, Lord Van Zeeks? This trial has taken many hours of the court's time, having spent so long already. Exactly, having been so long already, we don't want to go waste any more precious time. As I was saying, having spent so long already, it would seem churlish to deny the defense a mere 5 minutes. Yeah? Very well then. Counsel, you have 5 minutes. My dear fellow, I apologize for my tardy arrival. Mr. Sholmes, are you alright now? Ha 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 ha! Alright, I'm all wrong. Sorry? I've only just managed to summon the strength to stand, man. I asked the judge for 5 minutes. But I fear even that may prove too much for me. Pray forgive I should pass out. Let's make this discussion as short as possible. Hurley, this place is full of idiots. None of them can see how wonderful your chemical blood analysis is. Ah, well, that concoction of mine was really just a bit of sport to assist me in my investigations. I never took the trouble to refine it for appraisal by the scientific community. An oversight on my part. Right. Modesty? Surely not. But enough of that. I'm here to give you this, my dear fellow. What's that? A lavender furoshiki wrapping? A leaving present from Miss Susato. From Miss Susato? If possible, matters were to be settled without me giving you this. Those were her instructions, but she asked me to do her this favor. I don't understand. Mrs. Susato foresaw today's events, I believe. She knew that the culprit would attempt to escape justice by means both devious and underhand. And that you, Mr. Naruhodo, fighting fairly as you are wont to do, would find yourself in considerable peril. At that very moment of crisis, you would be given this small parcel. Those were the dear lady's instructions. A leaving present from Susato-san. Whatever could it be? What is this? Oh! It's a machine I made. Ah! Look, I used this for Lay's invention. What is that? I call it the cat flap-a-mat. You can make a cat flap for a little furry friend like Waggy in seconds. What's Susie up to? Mrs. Sutton muttered the following words before she left. I'm a failure. I don't deserve to be a judicial assistant. What? Didn't she say something like that? You really are the best judicial assistant in the world. Well, that's extremely flattering. But I'm sorry to say that I've been a complete failure. Whatever did she mean by that, Mr. Sholmes? That night, when you left Windibanks in pursuit of the thieves, Mrs. Sutton made use of this contraption for a certain purpose. That is your answer, dear fellow. Not at all cryptic, then. Mrs. Sutton used this cat flap-a-mat that night? But why? Cat flap-a-mat has entered into the court record. Oh, wait, I see. Your 5 minutes is over. We're out of time already? I'm grateful to you for affording us that brief recess, Mr. Reaper. I need no thanks, Detective. After all, the die is cast. Is it really? The jurors are unanimous in their leanings. No doubt my learned friend will consider a summation examination. But any attempt to alter the verdict now would be utterly futile. I wonder... Mr. Naruhodo! Yes? The rest is down to you, dear fellow. What is your plan? The rest is down to me. I need to be careful here. If I make one wrong move, the trial will end badly. My lord, the defense requests, I think, further cross-examination because now we have something to disprove it. Further cross-examination. The jurors have spoken. Protocol dictates you may not cross-examine a new witness now. The defense is not asking for the cross-examination of it. The defense is not asking for the cross-examination of a new witness. Rather, to continue with one of an existing witness. What? It would appear that a rather important detail has escaped your attention, Mr. Reaper. My lord! Request your lordship's permission to interrupt the cross-examination. Thank you, officer. Very well. The cross-examination is hereby temporarily suspended. I presume you have no objection, counsel? No, my lord. So nobody can say anything then. If Bruno asks to resume his cross-examination of Mr. Graydon, the court is obligated to allow it. This is absurd! I would remind those present that this is my courtroom. I concur that the defense is entirely within its rights to request the continuation of the cross-examination. However, I will not permit an unremitting protraction of these proceedings. Therefore, I have decided to afford the defense one final opportunity in concluding the cross-examination. Counsel, you must choose but one statement from the witness testimony, and but one piece of evidence to present in support of your argument against it. A single chance to present evidence? If following that, the situation remains unchanged, I shall move to adjudication. Is that clear, counsels? You will not press the witness any further. My lord. Yes, my lord. A single statement and a single piece of evidence. Most generous. Well then, Mr. Naruhodo, it's high time I fell in a dead faint. I leave this in your capable hands. This man is such a legend. Mr. Sholmes! Descend so... I'm sorry, I really hate... Like, these words! Who uses these words here? To stand so insouciantly before the court in a state of such high fever. Either the man has extraordinary strength of mind, or an extraordinary lack of feeling. I imagine he's feeling very little now. The detective is sleeping soundly on one of the antechambers. Strike a man when he's down, why don't you? Well then, counsel, are you fully prepared? Yes. One statement. One piece of evidence. I won't let Mr. Sholmes down. Or Iris. And I won't waste this final chance that Susato-san has given me. This is going to decide the entire outcome of the trial. Very well then. Under the terms I have outlined, you may resume the cross-examination. I can see him through the people in the door. So I think what Mr. Zato is meaning to imply is that people did not exist at that point in time.
Objection!
There we go. What on earth is that eccentric contraption, counsel? Oh, it's my cat flopping mat, my lord. It makes a way for cats to get in and out of a room. It can cut through any door you can think of and make a new little door in the middle of it. That's right, my lord. It's a device for creating so-called cat flaps. Small doors for cats to come and go as they please, without their owners having to open the main door. I'm sure we can all work that out for ourselves. Ah! But that cat lover's contrivance has no possible relevance to this case. Oh, really? Of course it doesn't. To start with, there was no cat flap in the pawnbroker's door. Not being a keeper of cats myself, I'm afraid I fail to see what this has to do with the matter at hand. Perhaps it would help if I described its function another way then. This contraption is able to create a peephole in any door you can imagine in practically no time at all. I beg your pardon? A peephole, you say? 2 nights ago, we arrived at the scene only minutes after the murder of Mr. Windibank had taken place. That's right. According to the paperwork at the yard, it was you, your Japanese assistant, and Sholmes. Yes, the 3 of us were together, and it's recently come to my attention that my assistant made use of this device at the time. Your assistant did what? There was a peephole in the storeroom door. I can attest to that. Because I looked through the peephole myself in order to see inside the locked storeroom. This is ludicrous. What are you even trying to say? Of course there was a peephole in the door. I said as much in my testimony. How else could I have witnessed the crime, for pity's sake? Yes, how could you? What? Counsel, kindly say what you mean. Alright, it's time. Time to strike the final blow. What I mean is this, my lord. My assistant made the peephole in the storeroom door, and until such time as she did, the door had no hole in it to look through. What? No!
Objection!
This is a farce. Are you really suggesting that the peephole in the door was... Yes, it was created only after the incident had taken place by my judicial assistant using this device. Your assistant tampered with the crime scene whilst being fully aware of the gravity of her actions? This is a most serious act of vandalism. For which I humbly apologize, my lord. It was in the few minutes I had left the scene in order to pursue the Skulkin brothers and alert the police. Nevertheless, in the light of this new information, it becomes apparent that Mr. Graydon's testimony is riddled with holes. Ironically, riddled with, explain yourself, counsel. The majority of Mr. Graydon's testimony that appears to incriminate the defendant is based upon what he witnessed through the peephole in the storeroom door. Yes, the filthy ghost shooting the man in the back. However, if at the time of the incident, that peephole did not yet exist in the door, there's no possible way that you could have seen what you claim to have seen. In short, your entire testimony is a pack of lies. Ugh. Order, order, order! Is there any credence in this revelation?
Objection!
None whatsoever, as my learned friend must surely realize. Exactly. It's just some cheap trick designed to discredit me. I'm afraid not, sir. Of course it is. Do you seriously expect people to believe that plaything can cut through a solid wooden door? Oh yes, I designed it to be very powerful. It can cut through even the toughest of doors. That's absurd. I don't believe it for a second. Haha, I had a feeling you'd say that. What? Waggy, gooey, time for dinner. Oh, she did not. She made a cat hole in the courtroom door. That's amazing. Well? Young lady, this is the Old Bailey. One does not make cat flaps in the oak paneling at the Old Bailey. I'm not done yet. Don't worry. This doesn't mean that the peephole in the storeroom door at Windibanks was made by your machine. There's no way you can prove that it was. No, but it's easy. What? The cat flaps my cat flap creates are all a fixed size, and the dimensions of the peephole at Windibanks are an exact match. Ugh. Hee. Old Silky's lost for words. Excellent work, Iris. Thank you. And now it's my learned student's friend's turn to be lost for words, I feel. I believe your judicial assistant has already left the country for your Eastern Island home. Well, yes, that's true. Then you may have some difficulty in establishing all the facts. For the sake of argument, let us assume the peephole has the dimensions that are a perfect fit for this contraption. In that case, when was the peephole cut? Prosecution demands proof of your answer. What is the purpose of your line of inquiry, Lord Van Zieks? It's very simple, my lord. The defense argues that the peephole was created after the incident using this device. But now that the perpetrator has returned to her native land, she cannot testify to the fact. There is no proof. And for as long as the defense remains unable to prove when the peephole was made, my learned friend's claim amounts to nothing more than a baseless accusation. What? Actually, I can totally prove that. Indeed, that is so, Lord Van Zieks. Well, counsel, don't give up now, Runo. This is the time to create your own opening and force your way through. I don't know if I can do this, but I do know one thing. Susato-san is the greatest judicial assistant in the world. Very well. The counsel for the defense will present evidence to support the claim made. Prove that the peephole in the door of Windibank's storeroom was created after the event and not before. I would think that I'd assume that either one of these would work.
Take that!
What are you? A print from the detective's infernal cameras again? My judicial assistant, Miss Susato Mikotoba, is an extremely intelligent and capable woman, which is why I never had any cause to doubt that she would have considered this scenario and made sure I had the necessary proof. And the necessary proof is this photographic print, counsel? This print shows a scene of the shot moments after the defendant entered the premises. Agreed. It also shows the accused mercilessly wielded a gun in the direction of the defenseless broker. But more to the point, It pictures the storeroom door in the background. Let me see that print again. I don't believe it. This really is quite remarkable. The door to the storeroom is completely devoid of a people of any description. Ah! Mr. Graydon, you couldn't possibly have witnessed a crime as you claim to have done, because at that time it happened, there was no people in the door. In other words, your testimony is a catalog of lies. Order! I'm satisfied that the defense has substantiated its claim beyond all reasonable doubt. This witness's testimony was entirely fallacious. God, I hate English. Fallacious. That's not the only thing we know beyond all reasonable doubt. My learned friend's assistant, guilt, can no longer be denied. The woman tampered with a crime scene. But more importantly, good lord, there's more, Lord Van Zieks? The defense may have established a reprehensible instance of perjury, but that is no proof that this man is the victim's killer. Yes, that's right. What? I was there at the scene. It's true. And I was shot in the arm. It's true. But that's all. Yes, in fact, if you look at the circumstances, I'm the victim here. Oh, please. No! I don't believe this. But they're right. As it stands now, I don't have any definitive proof that he is the culprit. Still, he can't worm his way out of it now. Iris, you know what they say. There's no point in locking the cat's door after the cat is bolted. Isn't that right, Runo? As Hurley always says, one lie begets another. No, wait. That might have been a line I wrote for him in one of my stories. Well, no matter who said it first, you're right. Mr. Graydon, not only did you give false testimony to the court, but the lies you told make no sense. Make no sense? What do you mean by such a remark? What you said in your testimony reveals that you know something you shouldn't have known. In other words, there's a fundamental inconsistency in your statements. What?
Objection!
This is provocative talk, counsel. Won't you enlighten the court? Explain this alleged inconsistency. Iris is right. One lie begets another. The inconsistency is revealed by the lies in the witness's statements. They show that Mr. Graydon had knowledge of something he should not have known anything about, namely, the bloodstains on the coat, because he wouldn't have been able to see that. The bloodstains that were present on Miss Lestrade's coat. That's right. The victim's blood spattered all over her when she shot him. But how could you possibly have known that? Obviously, because I saw her do it through the people in the... The point is not that you lie in your testimony, Mr. Graydon. It's the nature of the lie you concocted that's so revealing. You're not making any sense. Then let me ask you a simple question. How is it, Mr. Graydon, that you knew of the existence of the peephole in the storeroom door? What? Well, obviously, I... Has the cat got your tongue, witness? The peephole in the door was made after the incident occurred. And once I returned to the shop, having failed to catch the two burglars, Scotland Yard's investigators arrived immediately. Since that time, the police have been at Windibanks constantly, carrying out their investigation. Isn't that right, Inspector Gregson? Well, yes, of course. The place is chock full of pawned articles, and my lads have to thoroughly examine them all. So I gave them order to have officers working around the clock in shifts so we can get through it all. And consequently, there's no way that you, Mr. Graydon, could have gained access to the shop. Therefore, you should have known nothing about the people in the storeroom door. So the fact that its existence forms the basis of your testimony is completely inexplicable. And yet, the fact remains Mr. Graydon did maintain that he witnessed the crime take place to the people in the door. How on earth is that possible? It's not. Could I have a word, please, Lord Van Zieks? Speak, Inspector. It's just that I really ought to be getting back to the station now to put in my report. There's really nothing more I can add to this testimony, so if it's all the same to you, permission denied. Oh. It's not at all the same to me, Inspector. Not at all. You will remain exactly where you are until this trial concludes. Of course, sir. Mr. Graydon. You shouldn't have known about the existence of that peephole. Which can only mean that you must have been informed about it by somebody else. Ugh!
Objection!
Stop there, my learned friend. You realize, I trust, that the words you just uttered have extremely serious implications. Yes. But the defense believes that the details about the case that Mr. Graydon claims to have seen must have been revealed to him by a certain person before his testimony. And, in fact, considering the particular clue we have, there's really only one person that could be. Who is this person in question, counsel? Who gave the witness details of the crime scene to facilitate his false testimony? Gregson did, because they were talking earlier.
Take that!
The truth is, it can only have been you, Inspector Gregson. Eh?
Objection!
You had better have some proof to substantiate such a rash claim, my learned friend. Consider the fact that we have only been aware of Mr. Ashley Graydon's identity for the last few hours. We learned of it only during the course of the trial today. Indeed, preparations for his testimony were made with great urgency during our hour-long recess. Well, the police executed the subpoena and brought the man here from the communications station. And until that time, Mr. Graydon would have had no idea, no inkling that he would suddenly be required to appear in court. Are you suggesting that until such time as he was summoned? Yes, my lord. Until then, it's reasonable to assume he knew nothing of the people. It was only once Mr. Graydon was in the stand that he realized his position. That he would have to defend himself against the accusation that he was the third intruder. You're suggesting to the court that it was while this trial was in progress he received the information? So he could commit perjury in order to save his skin? Exactly. And the only person with knowledge of the investigation that he had any contact with is you, Inspector Gregson. This is a bloomin' outrage. Why would I be giving away details of our investigations to this fella, eh? I was summoned to his lordship's chambers during the recess in any case. Had you forgotten that? Quite true. I had a number of questions regarding the events that transpired at the pawnbrokery. Which means the first time these two laid eyes on one another was after proceedings resumed following the recess. Since then, they've been in full view of the stand, where such illicit discussions couldn't possibly have occurred. Ugh. Oh, I just remembered something, Bruno. What is it, Iris? There was one time before, wasn't there? I think it was when Ginny was testifying. Oh yes, now that you mention it. When the bailiff was dispatched to retrieve McGilden's music box from the scene of the crime. That's it! It was during that testimony. I remember finding it strange at the time. Mr. Gray and the inspector seemed to be having some kind of secret discussion. It would have been possible for you to give Mr. Gray the information he needed then. You little toe rag! You're making this all up! I'm a respectable Scotland Yard inspector, for crying out loud! Why would I do something like that? Why would I be giving away confidential details to the likes of this bloke? Admittedly, you wouldn't have had any reason to do something like that for no gain. But perhaps it was part of a deal of some kind. Then it starts to make more sense. What deal, counsel? I wonder if perhaps in exchange for details about the people of the crime scene, Mr. Grant agreed to give a certain something to the inspector. I'm sure I need not remind the inspector that, if found to be true, striking a deal of any kind with a witness would be considered a gross case of malfeasance. Well,
Objection!
It's becoming clear that jumping in with the accusations is this Nipponese student's specialty. I don't do that. But with the stakes so high, the prosecution is not prepared to listen to baseless charges. It is incumbent on the defense now to present evidence in support of this diabolical claim. Evidence? Just what are you proposing that the inspector demanded of the witness in return? The court must see proof of this alleged deal. If Inspector Gregson really did strike a deal with Mr. Graydon, then logically, there's only one thing he could have asked for. That must be it. Bruno, do you think it could be? Yes. It's the missing link that would join all the dots together in this puzzle. I must press you for an answer now, counsel. What evidence explains the nature of this alleged deal that Inspector Gregson made with the witness? Not sure which one it is. I want to say it has to do with, it's either this or this one. That seems to work. Inspector Gregson. Besides this murder, isn't that true that you've been working on another very important case? What are you getting at now, Sunshine? Is it possible that this other top secret case is what's alluded to in this newspaper article here? The classified secrets being leaked overseas from the Ministry of Justice? How the bleeding Nora could you... We discovered during the course of this trial the music box deposit at Windibanks by Magnus McGilded. A special music box designed to play 2 discs at once. It would seem very likely now that encoded on the pair of discs that were in Mr. McGilled's possession are the leaked classified secrets. So I put it to you, Inspector, that in order to recover the second of the discs containing those secrets, you covertly made a deal with Mr. Graydon in which you exchanged the disc for details of the case. You little... Ah! Order! On the day of the incident, when we met you at Windibanks, you said this. I'll be taking that whatever it is that Miss McGillet's down to the yard. Thank you very much. So hand it over. No, don't give it to him. It's mine, that is. Mine. I'm sorry, miss. But anything belonging to McGilded has to be taken as evidence now. Scotland Yard already knew at that time, isn't that right? That Magnus McGill was involved in the stealing of government secrets. My orders were, recover the medium used to convey the secrets lead from the ministry, and do it on the QT, strictly hush-hush. And that explains why, when I presented this disc as evidence to the court, you objected so heavily, I presume. Because you knew they contained highly confidential information. Blimey, not likely. I mean, I wasn't that sure of it myself. I realized that there was a possibility, that's all. Inspector, surely you're not saying that in order to acquire the second of these music box discs, you did indeed reveal the confidential details of the crime scene to the witness. to aid and abet this man in giving false testimony? There's no other way that Mr. Graydon could have known of the existence of the peephole. It's the only explanation. A deal was struck between these two men. No!
Objection!
If, and I stress if, this sobering assertion turns out to be found in truth, it would mean that the second disc is, as we speak, here in this very courtroom. Wait, what? In this room? How could you possibly make a claim like that? Because Inspector Gregson is a Scotland Yard detective. What? What's that supposed to mean, eh? As a seasoned policeman, the inspector will have approached this alleged deal with caution. Certainly, he would not have accepted a gentleman's agreement in this matter. No, he would have insisted on having the article agreed upon in the palm of his hand. Good gracious! Then, you mean to say Inspector Grayson already has the item in question in his possession? He has the second disc actually on his person?
Yes!
The defense demands that the inspector is searched at once. Definitely. They could only have struck a deal with each other when Ginny was testifying before. And Gregsy hasn't moved from the witness stand since. My lord, please, order examination of his personal effects immediately. Well, Inspector? This young lad wants to tone down his imagination. He's insulted me and my profession quite enough. However, if it'll put this man to bed and dispel any doubts about my involvement, I'll happily submit to a body search. What? He's going to agree to it? I presume you're aware of the precipice on which you now teeter, my learned student friend. You've made a most serious allegation against Scotland Yard here. If, following the search of the inspector's personal effects, no disc is found, you will be deemed unfit for court service. This trial will end, and my country's government will formally demand of yours that you are severely reprimanded. That sounds serious. Indeed, to have a visiting student make such a defamatory remarks about our country's most senior police force is not something Her Majesty's government will be able to overlook. You're just threatening Runa because you're scared. The accusation is beyond serious. You must be prepared for grave consequences. Also, tell that 10-year-old child to shut the f*** up. It's true. I can't imagine Gregson would have accepted a gentleman's agreement for something so critical. The disc must have physically changed hands, which means the inspector should have it. But somehow, something doesn't feel quite right here. Very well, counsel. You know the implications, so let me ask you one final time. Yes, my lord. Do you still persist in formally requesting a search of the inspector's personal effects? Search someone else, perhaps? Yes, the defense fully demands the search be conducted. Well, don't say you weren't warned, but your typical Nipponese stubbornness may well land you in hot water this time. Perhaps the lesson will do you some good. Fair enough. I got nothing to hide. Very well then. Bailiff, conduct a search of the inspector's personal effect. The defense demands a search, but not of the Inspector Grayson. What? Now what's all this? I'm the one you're accusing, aren't I? I thought you wanted to search me. No, Inspector, not you. Somebody else. What's the meaning of all this, eh? Lost it at last, have you, sunshine? The court shouldn't have put you up with this nonsense. You're being completely irrational. Be quiet, all of you. Oh. Runa's doing what you all told him to do and having the courage of his convictions. So you should respect that and listen to what he has to say in good faith. Because that's the British way. Well said, young lady. Indeed, this court is in awe of the defense counsel's conviction and eagerly awaits his next words. You what? Now don't be hasty, my lord. If I'm not mistaken about the things I've seen in court today, I'm fairly sure that I know who has the disc at the moment. Only one person it can be. Counsel, of whom do you request this search now? Oh, wait a minute. He should have it. Of my lord, Mr. Nash Skulkin. Well, I never. Eh? Blimey. Me? Him? Very well then, bailiff. Restrain the witness and conduct a thorough search of his personal effects. Please, my lord. Inspector? Scotland Yard, has to object to the search.
Objection!
Unfortunately for you, Inspector, your objections carry no weight here. Eh? In this courtroom, only the prosecution and defense have the authority to object. But Lord Van Zeeks, I have no idea what forces are in play that might influence your actions. But personally, I have no intention of obstructing the course of this trial. Bailiff, carry out the search. Now, hold on a mo. I don't know nothing. Nothing about no disc. Cut it out! Ah! Here, my lord. In the witness's pocket. I found this. Good lord, that's another music box disc. I don't know nothing about it. Nothing. That is the second music box disc left behind by Magnus McGilded. Is it not, Inspector Gregson? Ah! How many chips do you have? Order, order, order! Mr. Skulkin, what have you to say for yourself? Gordon Bennett! I mean, just Gordon Flamin' Bennett! I swear I didn't know nothing about that disc. Honest to God! Counsel, would you please explain what exactly is going on here? The alleged deal that was struck was between this witness and this detective, no? Without question, my lord. Then for pity's sake, why on earth was this man in possession of the disc that the inspector traded for information? Inspector Grayson is a shrewd, calculated man who rarely loses his composure. But at one particular point in this trial, he exhibited some unusual behavior for a brief moment. I don't recall one usual behavior. It was, yes, during my cross-examination of Mr. Graydon. Tell me, Mr. Graydon, when you left the pawnbrokery that night, was it by any chance with the second disc in your jacket pocket? I admit to nothing of the sort. While Mr. Graydon answered my questions, the inspector appeared to have grabbed Nash Skulkin by his coat and was shaking him violently. Yeah, he did it all. Thought me noggin was gonna fall clean off, I did. I was wishing I'd been born as me brother was. And what exactly happened to make the detective attack you like that? I ain't got a clue. He just suddenly turned and grabbed me like that and started shaking me. Well, the blazes, didn't you mention the third gun when we got you down the station? That's what he said. He had it right down my ear hole, he did. Me head's about throbbing now. The way the detective behaved then was extremely out of character. But looking back now, it must have been that he did it. That was the opportunity Inspector Gregson created for himself in order to hide the disc. Well, bless my wig, he hid it? You! But I'm afraid I fail to comprehend the motive here. If the detective had acquired the disc he was after, why on earth would he then proceed to hide it in another man's pocket? This is a court of law. He could have submitted the item as evidence. It would appear, my lord, that the inspector was not at liberty to do that. Why ever not? As the man himself revealed earlier, his current assignment has some special conditions. My orders were, recover the medium used to convey the secrets lead from the Ministry, and do it on the QT, strictly hush-hush. Hush-hush? A top-secret assignment, is it? As far as we're aware, the information stolen comes from confidential government communications. It would seem that if the information were to be revealed in court as evidence, it would be problematic. Does that sum up the situation, Inspector? I'm operating under direct order from the Ministry. I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to answer that question. So, realizing there was a chance you may be searched here in court, you took steps to hide the disc you had acquired from the witness. Does this mean... He only pretended to attack Mr. Skulkin in order to get close enough to him, to slip the second disc into his pocket. So it was all a pretense? Well now, Inspector Gregson, and you, Mr. Graydon, are you prepared to admit to the accusation made against you of this alleged deal? Admit to it? Yours truly? Please. Mr. Graydon! Clearly our Eastern visitor has an uncommonly active imagination. However, there's no proof that I passed that disc to the inspector. But then, how do you explain the reason why you knew about the peephole? I'm under no obligation to explain. Yes, you are! You've been accused of murder! What? Yes, I lied in my testimony. That I admit, so sentence me accordingly. But that is all I admit. Murder? Leaking government secrets? Striking a deal with a detective? All of it is this young Eastern man's fantasy. I have no idea what any of that is about. You... What? Well, what about you then, Inspector Gregson? Do you admit to making a deal with Mr. Graydon in order to acquire the disc? Ladies and gents of the jury, as a Scotland Yard inspector, I will declare this and nothing more. I'm acting in the best interest of the country. Whatever I've done, it's been in the name of justice. So, as members of the public of this fine country, I'd like to think that justice will be your guiding light when you're making your decisions. This is quite a quandary indeed. Rarely have I encountered such extraordinary tumultuousness in the concluding of a trial. Nevertheless, in the absence of any further evidence to be presented, I believe it is time that we put the matter to the jury for their final leanings. Well now, as a fellow servant of Queen and Country, I must say I sympathize with the old inspector. Yes, he's a dependable man, I'm quite sure. In service, one becomes a good judge of character. Even crossing your eyes doesn't help when it comes to looking at this case. It's all blurred to me. Well, as a fellow professional, I'd like to put my faith in the detective, really. Graydon is highly skilled operator, stop. Currently in the presence of idol, stop. Detective has very much trust in eyes. More than this, I cannot say. I don't believe it. These 6 jurors they're going to believe Gregson. If they declare the decision now. Is Jeannie going to be found guilty? If I don't manage to produce some definitive evidence right now, then we're going to lose. Either some proof that Graydon killed Mr. Windibank or stole the government's secrets. Or some evidence to force Gregson into admitting that he struck a deal with the witness. Well then, counsel. I think it's time I impose on the jurors to declare their final decisions, no? That is, unless you have some compelling evidence that you have thus far not presented in court. If I let the judge call on the jurors to announce their leanings... Oh, that's my bad. So there's no choice then, Runo. You have to throw some more evidence at them. This is it now. It all comes down to this. Who do I present evidence against? Gregson or Graydon? think we're gonna go with Gregson. Inspector Gregson, there's one final piece of evidence I would like you to see. Eh? What's that then? If you refuse to acknowledge that you did in fact strike a deal with the witness here today, then you leave us no choice but to examine this piece of evidence thoroughly. Well, go on. This is my last chance. It looks like I'm going to have to force his hand here. One final piece of evidence to get this detective to admit to the deal he's clearly struck with Graydon.
Take that!
Is that Mr. McGilda's peculiar music box, Counsel? Yes, with a disc already in place, ready to play. I think perhaps now would be a good time to listen to the sound produced by the music box again. Only this time, with a second disc we've just discovered, set in place as well. Goodness, this disc, Counsel? No, wait, I can't let you do that. Why not? But because, well, because it's got nothing to do with this case. That's why.
Objection.
Not true, Inspector. Eh? The defense has already proposed that the sounds heard by the court earlier from this music box were part of a Morse code message. We know that Morse code comprises of two distinct tones. The defense believes that the second disc contains the second tone needed to complete the message. And now we have a chance to confirm that theory. For crying out loud, Sunshine, we're talking about state secrets here. If you go letting the whole courtroom hear confidential information like that, it's treason. Then do you admit to the charge? That in order to protect those state secrets, you engage in unlawful dealings with the witness? You're mad. If you let that secret information out in the public domain, you're making an enemy of the entire British government, you idiot!
Objection.
Let's not forget, Inspector, that you, a Scotland Yard officer, leaked confidential case details to a witness. That you continue to lie to the court, and all because by fair means or foul, you're determined to do your duty. Well, by fair means or foul, I'm prepared to do mine. Don't you dare. I will stop at nothing to protect my client. I don't care who I make an enemy of. My lord, if you please. The court must hear the sounds made by that music box. Come on, Van Zieks, for Pete's sake, stop him!
Objection.
Inspector, you should know my methods by now. Have you seen my heel? I'm a prosecutor. I'm no Scotland Yard puppet. Ugh. In this courtroom, my duty is to the law, so let me propose a toast. To uncovering the truth. By fair means or foul. No! Very well. The defense's stance here and that of the prosecution have been made very clear, I feel. Therefore, in accordance with the defense's request, the court will now listen as his Visibot is set in operation once more. This time with the second disc in place and both discs playing simultaneously. Oh, listen to that. It's unmistakable now. It's Morse code. Hold it! All right, I admit it. Whatever you want, but for the love of God, shut that bloomin' box up! Let me ask you again then, Inspector Gregson. Did you or did you not strike a deal with the witness next to you in the stand, Mr. Ashley Graydon? Specifically, did you furnish the witness with confidential case details in exchange for this music box disc? Did you reveal the existence of the peephole in the pawnbroker's storeroom door, Inspector? I did. Stop! What are you doing, man? It's all exactly like the young Eastern lawyer said. When the trial resumed after recess, and we were stood there in the stand together, that's when he approached me with the deal. Shut up, you imbecile! Shut up!
Psst, you there. You're the detective who turned up at the pawnbroker the other day, aren't you? I may have something you're looking for, Inspector, with me at this very moment. So how about a trade? I suggest you accept. Or information that may make certain individuals uncomfortable will soon become very public indeed.
I couldn't let the information become public knowledge, not under any circumstance. I accepted the man's proposal and told him details about the case that I should have put him in the clear. The peephole in the storeroom door and the bloodstains on the overcoat. By giving false testimony, this witness intended to have the defendant wrongly accused of murder. Inspector, you knew that. Yet you still revealed those details to facilitate the witness's perjury. I did. But then it turned out the peephole had only been made that night after the incident took place. Scotland Yard wasn't aware of that, if I'm perfectly honest. Well, Mr. Graydon, what do you have to say for yourself? There's nothing and no one left for you to hide behind. You struck a deal with the inspector in order to escape conviction of a very serious crime. Namely this. You are the third intruder who broke into the pawnbrokery on the night in question. And you perpetrated the murder of the proprietor, Mr. Pop Windebank. You. Oh, jeez. Traitor! Oh, God. Bailiff! Bailiff! Restrain that man! At once! That's it then. It's all over. I despised my life growing up. Those slums are vile places. I was cursed from birth, born to poverty, the son of a penniless artisan. My parents did nothing but quarrel all day long. What little money they had was never spent on me. So I set about studying, to better myself, to one day escape from that hellhole. You eventually became a communications officer. I admired your determination. But then you decided to try to sell government secrets. Why? Isn't it obvious? Because I wanted money. Even now, years later, the nightmares of my life in the slums wake me in the small hours. I wanted to drown them out with more money than anyone who lived in that squalor could ever imagine. Then one day, I met him. Mr. Madness McGill did.
You're a fiend with a queer heart, talented you are. I have money to throw your way if you're interested. All you need to do is go along with me a little plan now.
I was to steal the ministry's telegraphic message logs, and McGilda would buy them for a handsome sum. As I was responsible for inspections of the ministry's communications office, it was a simple enough task. The lure of the devil's offerings, how easy it is to succumb. But you must surely have realized the seriousness of the crime you were committing. And for that reason, I took great lengths to ensure that my actions were untraceable. By using the music box, my father was a brickmaker, though my mother divorced him when I was still a child. Yes, Mr. Mason Milverton. That's right. He was very skilled with his hands. He'd once been a music box maker's apprentice. I imagined his skills would be sufficient to create a machine that could generate Morse code. So I sought out my father again, to employ his services. It's the first time I'd seen him since I left the slums 10 years earlier. Look at you, Ashley. What a fine gent you become, eh? He was a different man to the one in my memory. A thin, frail old man. But poverty had never broken him. Never corrupted him like it had me. I was sure that he wouldn't help me if I told him the real reason. So I made up a story. I've got some work for you, Father. I need some music box discs made. Music box discs, eh? A musician friend of mine has written some music he wants to sell to the public. I've brought the score with me. There are 2, actually. I'd be delighted, son. It's been 20 years since I did any work like this, though. Fetch me my tools, would you? They're in the loft. That's how I had to make the 2 discs. Thereby splitting the information in 2, you were taking considerable precautions indeed. It was to protect myself as much as anything. It meant that I could deal with McGilden in 2 separate transactions. The first involved the first of 2 discs and the music box for playing them. I exchanged them with McGilden for 10 guineas. Then on the receipt of the second disc, he would pay 1,000 guineas. So, what happened on the omnibus 2 months ago? Was the second part of a deal? The exchange of the second disc? Yes. I sold the man information that way a number of times already, but it seems he became reluctant to part with his money. But that doesn't quite make sense, Mr. Graydon. For why was it done on the omnibus 2 months ago? Your father, Mr. Milverton, was the one dealing with Mr. McGilded, and not yourself. When I received the 1,000 guineas after my first completed dealings with McGilded, I decided to give 200 to my father for his troubles. When my father realized something was amiss. In time, he worked out I must be involved in something dubious. And when he did, he said to me, "Next time there's an exchange, you'll let your old man do it, understand? Otherwise, I won't take your money anymore." That was my father's way of dealing with it, I suppose. Climb onto the omnibus, hand over the second disc, take the money from McGilded. That's it. He had no idea what was actually on the discs I asked him to make. He never knew. Just like I'll never know why everything went so horribly wrong that night. All I know is that the disc was taken from him, and he never returned home. It was only then that I found out what sort of monster McGilded really was. So after 10 years of not once uttering it, I swore on my father's name. To exact revenge. Revenge? As anyone with even the remotest knowledge of the man will no doubt be able to imagine. McGilded brought all his wealth and influence to bear in the most despicable of ways. To crush any semblance of justice in his trial. The crime scene was tampered with, evidence was fixed, and witnesses were bribed. That trial 2 months ago was a farce from start to finish. My feet had barely touched British soil back then, and I walked into that hornet's nest completely unaware of the sinister background to it all. I made plenty of money out of my dealings with McGilded by then, so I spared nothing in my arrangements 2 months ago. I knew exactly who to hire. If you're willing to pay the price, there are people in this city willing to do anything you ask. McGilded himself has shown me that. Are you saying that... I think you have the picture now. After he twisted everything to his favor in this courtroom to ensure that he walked free. I took matters in my own hands. I delivered the justice that monster deserved. That tragic accident following the trial here 2 months ago was planned and executed by yours truly. McGilded's death that day was caused by this man.
Everything is ready, sir. If you'd like to follow me into the courtroom.
What's this, officer? Just sooner than I was led to believe.
I hope it's not inconvenient, sir. There were some changes to his schedule. Well, I must be making tracks now. Tis time for the inspection. They're going to examine the omnibus again, so I'm told. I asked if I could be present for it myself.
It's that policeman who came to tell McGilded he could examine the omnibus again. That's right, an imposter, hired by me. McGilded used his wealth to manipulate the trial. He paid people to adulterate the omnibus with all manner of false evidence. He threatened witnesses to lie in their testimony. So I gave the man a taste of his own medicine. Once the omnibus was doused in paraffin, one of my sham policemen ushered McGilded inside and sent him on a one-way journey to hell. An eye for an eye. That's how I avenged my father's death. A spine-chilling account indeed. But that wasn't the end of it for me. There was a loose end, you see. A loose end? Yes, I should think it's obvious. The second disc, which my father had taken to exchange with McGilded. Ah, yes. There was indeed no mention of it in the man's trial 2 months ago. Clearly because it had been removed from the scene of the crime. When I realized it was missing, I remembered something. Something from the first time I dealt with McGilded. But this is the first of the 2 discs, and the music box you need to play them. Well, look at that now. What an ingenious little invention. So then, as promised, 10 guineas for you, young man. What's this? Windibake's pawnbrokery? Aye, it's a pawnbroker's ticket, so it is. You can use it to redeem an article I've deposited there for ye. There's no need to give a name. Just hand him the ticket and tell the fiend the watchword. I've put a jewel in pawn for you. It'll fetch a good 10 guineas if you sell it, so it will. I've never heard of a pawnbrokery being used in quite that way before. Have you not, Mr. Graydon? London's pawnbrokers are very useful places, you know. Each one is like an extremely secure vault. So I knew that if he had taken steps to hide the disc, it would be in that pawnbrokery somewhere. And that on the night he killed my father, he must have entrusted the ticket to someone. Yes, to Gina. I remember now that when we first met you at Windibank's afternoon 2 days ago, you had a description of Miss Lestrade written down. How did you know who you were looking for? From the trial, that pickpocket's testimony was clearly peculiar. Anyone could see that. I realized immediately that she was another of McGilded's pawns, that he must have threatened her somehow. I was fairly convinced it would be her who had the ticket, so I started to make some inquiries. I had a strong suspicion the girl would come out of the woodwork on the redemption deadline. And he was absolutely right. And yes, sure enough, she did. All I needed to do was wait until the girl went to Windibank's to redeem the articles. But unfortunately, she redeemed only McGilded's overcoat and the one disc that was in its pocket. The all-important music box with the second disc inside was missing, because it had already been forfeited 2 days earlier. But I was unaware of that fact. Had I not been, I could have avoided a nighttime excursion. Meanwhile, as our investigation to the stolen government secrets was progressing, we'd picked up on the fact that McGilded was involved. Inspector, you've recovered fast. My orders were to recover the stolen information as quickly as possible. So we started gathering the fellow's possessions and examining whatever we could lay our hands on. We had a full-scale investigation going on in the yard, but we had to keep it as quiet as we could. Then, when the inspector here took the disc from me in the pawnbrokery that day, I became nervous. I was sure the music box and the second disc were still there in the shop somewhere. So I knew that it was a race against time. I had to find those articles before the police did. So that's what prompted you to break into the place that same night? With the help of your old friends, the Skulkin brothers. What happened that night in the pawnbrokery? I can only describe as a nightmare. While Nash and Ringo were searching the counter, I located the music box I'd sold to McGilda on the shelves for forfeited articles. And the second disc was inside. Yes, I slipped into my pocket with a very deep sigh of relief. But then, something entirely unexpected happened.
What are you doing in my shop?
A gunshot rang out in the shop, and I felt a sharp pain in my left arm. The broker fired his gun, and the bullet pierced your limb. Yes, exactly. But unfortunately, I decided to bring my own gun with me that night, just in case. Before I knew what was happening, I'd fired back. The man had already turned to flee. I hadn't intended to fire in his direction, much less kill him. But unfortunately for both of us, the bullet hit home. It struck him in the middle of his back as he fled through the storeroom door for refuge. A sorry, sorry tale. It all took place in the blink of an eye. I don't imagine Nash and Ringo even realized what had happened at first. I was terrified, so I fled. And that's the whole story. That's everything that happened at Windibanks on that wretched night. Earlier, you called McGilden a monster. A man who uses wealth and influence to distort the facts and escape justice for the crime of murder. What tragic irony. For what you have done is exactly the same. You've become the very monster you saw and despised so deeply in McGilded. Yes, I think I have. Well, this has been a long and exhausting trial. However, it would seem that at last we've arrived at the truth. Inspector Gregson, what of Mr. Ashley Graydon? He's been restrained, my lord, and is being escorted to the yard. He'll be charged with the murder of Mr. Windibank and the stealing of government secrets. Very good. And you, Inspector, regrettably, you will have to face charges yourself. Yes, my lord, of course. It transpires you were complicit in helping a criminal escape justice. The fact remains, whether or not you were doing so in the line of duty, the crime is a serious one, Inspector, and inexcusable. Now to the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade. Yeah. It's time for the final adjudication. Is the jury ready, Mr. Foreman? Yes, sir. Garrett Squadron standing by, sir. This is really it now. The last push, the final call, the finishing whistle. My men are ready to deliver their verdicts. Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Very well. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will now declare your final decision to the court.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Ha! That's the stuff. I'm off the hook. Finally, Bruno, you finally managed to do it. Finally is the word. I really wasn't sure if we'd come out on top for a while there. Susie was right. You're the best lawyer in the world. Miss Lestrade, I'm not finished with you yet. Eh? Well, what are you looking at me like that for? Before you start enjoying your freedom, there are certain other crimes to consider, Eh? 2 months ago, in my courtroom no less, you gave false testimony, did you not? In relation to the trial today, not only did you unlawfully enter Windibank's pawnbrokery, you also attempted to abscond with Mr. McGillicud's property, it seems. Eh? I never done nothing of the sort. Of course not. It's not like you were gleefully wearing Mr. McGillicud's coat in your cell yesterday or anything. Uh-huh. Just when I was getting excited about throwing a party for Ginny this evening. And turning our attention to the defense, determining that when played together, the music box discontained a message in Morse code was, well, certainly the most unexpected revelation, counsel. Quite so, my lord. The prosecution was caught entirely off guard. In fact, I think we should applaud my learned friend's courage here today. I propose a toast. To demanding that government secrets be disseminated before the entire courtroom. Ah! But very sorry about that. It was the only way I could get Inspector Gregson to admit to what he'd done, so... If I may say something on that point... Isn't that... It's, about the sounds produced by the music box before. I do wonder if that was really Morse code at all. What? What are you saying, madam? Oh, well, it's just that I'm really rather fanatical when it comes to Morse code, you see. So much so the whole world seems to be covered in dots and dashes to me, in fact. Goodness, madam. An unhealthy level of obsession, one feels. But I must say that in my opinion, the sounds produced by those two discs were nothing more than that. A meaningless series of two different tones. What? Can that really be? It wasn't Morse code after all? My lord, the defense would like to listen to the music box again. Are you off your nuts? How many times do I have to tell you? Those discs contain ministerial secrets, sunshine! This courtroom is not an appropriate forum to discuss the nature of government communications. We know McGillicud conspired to trade national secrets with our enemies, secrets acquired from Mr. Graydon. Now that the man has admitted to his crimes, we have no need to pursue the matter further. Ugh, but it's really going to bother me. Mrs. Strayed? Yeah, my lord? That what you have seen today here in this courtroom has been extremely disturbing. Falsified evidence, intimidation, perjury, a grim catalog of depravity. An appalling experience to befall any child. Come on, it ain't nothing I don't see most days in the back slums. I beg your pardon? If you're weak, you pay for it. That's just how life goes. Gina. But look, I reckon I've worked something out today. The world ain't fair, but if you want to change, you've got to start at home. You got to change how you are yourself. Well, that's a very laudable lesson, I would say. I eagerly look forward to the born-again Mrs. Strayed never gracing my courtroom with her presence again. Get the f*** out of my courtroom. Now, with regard to the murder of Mr. Pott Wildebank, proprietor of a pawnery business on Baker Street, I hereby declare the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade, not guilty. That's pretty cool, actually. That is all. Court is adjourned. Get the f*** out of my courtroom.